Oh,
Jonathan Majors, you play Ken Jones in the new ABC limited series When We Rise, which is a very ambitious retelling of the gay rights movement in America. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved with this.
well, the project came to me my final year, in my final semester at the Yale School of Drama. And it came pretty ordinarily. It came through email from my manager. And I guess what's different about it is I read it after, the conversation with my manager was no auditions until graduation, but I read it and was like, okay, well, maybe we're going to go for this one. And so, yeah, that's how it came to my attention, and that's how the process began.
Tell us a little bit about the audition. What was that like? Who was there?
The audition, who was there? My best friend, who was my reader, and a friend named Tobias Spellman, who is a videographer that just happened to be living in the area. And so it was a self-tape. I shot it at the video lab at the school.
Okay, well, congratulations. Tell us a little bit about who Ken Jones is.
So Ken Jones is, he currently lives in San Francisco, and he is a gay rights, HIV activist, Black liberation activist, gay liberation activist, a man of the people. He was a sailor in the U.S. Navy. He was a participant and fought in the Vietnam War. He's one of the many founders of my goodness, a cornucopia of mentor programs and drug treatment programs in San Francisco, specifically like in the hate. Yeah, and he's still kicking, he's still going, and still spreading the word.
Well, tell us a little bit about some of the research that you did to prepare for this and what your way into the character was.
So it's interesting just in growing up, you don't really come across a lot of gay rights history. You get the civil rights movement, and for me, my education in that movement, the civil rights movement, was predominantly around the African American struggle, the black rights, and then there was the on the periphery of that, women's rights. And so the gay rights struggle and fight and gay liberation was not something I was directly educated on. So I just hit the interwebs, Google, and kind of started from Stonewall and went backwards and then went forwards, to figure out where we are now with all the props, and then Prop 6, Prop 8, how those propositions came through and really unified and broke apart and unified the state of California. And I looked at it from the point of view of Ken, what he was dealing with. One being African American, two being Christian, three being in the military, and what it would have been like and what the relations were, or the lack of relations in those three specific communities around homosexuality. So yeah, that's how I kind of jumped in.
And what were some, I guess, specific qualities about Ken Jones as a person, his personality that stuck out for you, and things that you took in for your performance?
Well, it's interesting because I play younger Ken. And so in addition to all the books that I could read and the poetry I would read and I guess the social studies of the movement, I also got to talk to Ken Jones and hang out with him and eat with him and Skype with him and email with him and exchange music and all that stuff. But what was most interesting about him is that who he is now, of course, with everybody, is a accumulation of what has happened to us and what we've done. And so I really have the benefit of seeing, not the end product, but the current product, this version of Ken. And my job was to take, you know, who he was, some of his mannerisms and behavior and points of view, and kind of work backwards. And so it was kind of a deconstruction of what I saw and what I could deal with on the regular. He has a beautiful smile, you know, and he holds his smile back. Even now, you know, he's very timid with his smile. And he's also, you know, of the three, Cleve Jones, Aroma, and Ken, he is now, you know, the shyest, the most quiet of the three. However, knowing what he had done, it was clear to me that that was where he is now, not necessarily where he always was. And so just talking to him and kind of breaking it down, you know, he uses his hands a lot, he smiles, his voice, his gait was a big thing, the way he carries himself, the fact that he's a military man, and once you get that never leaves you, you know, so those things.
Yeah, and I mean, you kind of mentioned this, but what's fascinating about this show is that you see the development, not just physically. Obviously, Ken's played by two different people. You didn't morph into Omar from The Wire, but also the emotional and personality, the trajectories that they go on, the changes that they make throughout the course of the show. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so when we first meet Ken, Ken is very young when we first meet him, and he's very much entrenched in a world, that world being the U.S. Navy. And he begins there, and you find out very quickly that what his immediate background was, which is coming from, it's insinuated, a single family household, a single mother household in New Jersey. You know, we get that information. We also see that he's Black, obviously. So we get that background, and then that background goes right into where we first meet him, where he's a sailor, and we find out very quickly that he's a sailor, and he's in love with another sailor on the ship, Michael. And that's where he begins. And then from there, you know, he goes through, which I love about the show, is that you see him go through all the traumatic events in our lives that change us, you see. And so he experiences the love of his life, and we get to see what that is like. And then that changes everybody from who they are to who they will be. He falls in love with Michael. Michael leaves him in a way that his absence, his death, changes him considerably, and then he ends up leaving the Navy and becoming a citizen of the world, no longer under the umbrella or the protection, quote unquote, of the U.S. Navy. And so then he becomes a citizen and a civilian of the world, specifically San Francisco, and then becomes to really come into his own as a human being, and therefore his own sexuality. And so he really begins to grapple and wrestle and come to embrace who he is as a gay Black man, personally. And then again, he falls in love. He meets another gentleman, and that gentleman helps him open up and kind of understand who he is as an adult. And then the world happens, and he begins to, you know, fight against you know, the props and the death of their leader, Harvey Milk, and all these things. So at the end of the show, you've seen a young boy who's just getting his sea legs in the world, you know, pun intended, and then you see him standing and fighting for not just himself, but for those who are like him, and always for Black people, for gays, for the gays and lesbians, for the, you know, for the entire LGBTQ community, and that's where I leave him, and then he's picked up by Michael K. Williams, of course.
So during, we'll get a bit back up. You worked mostly with Gus Van Sant and Dee Reese, is that right? Those are the two.
Yeah.
What did they give you as directors that really helped you with your performance?
They were both very different. Gus was, well, it's interesting because Dustin Lance Black, who wrote the lion's share of the series, was also directing in a way. He was also there to, to be a dramaturg in a way, for not just the whole piece, but also for moments and the characters. So he was also a part of the development of the day-to-day, what was happening between, call to cut. And yeah, but Gus, they're both beautiful. Gus has a way of not, I wouldn't say not interfering, but he had a way of moving things around. And again, my experience is probably different from everybody else's, as we all have our own experiences. But Gus for me became, kind of like an omniscient helper. He would move things around in a scene, or whisper in someone's ear, and I would see that what was happening was shifting how I was responding to things. So he was very gentle in how he orchestrated the movement of Ken's story, and me playing Ken, he was very sensitive to not only the material that we were dealing with, but what the actor or the actors needed. He was a very quiet leader in that way, which I really, really appreciated. And then I learned a lot from, because he was essentially trusting you to pay attention and to stay open to what's going on. And he was directing everything around you to get you where he felt he needed it to be for, for the story he's telling. In addition, but that was also in conjunction to the story you were telling. So it was wonderful. And then Gus stepped back, and then we had Dee Reese come in, the director of Pariah, and the Mudbound, I guess, right?
Yes.
And yeah. And she was awesome. She was very different. Her energy was, let's shoot, let's get this going. She was very much hands-on and wanted to be involved, and was involved in the minutia of the scene work, and trying to really, find the flame of life and then fan it as much as possible, and to just really bring in, a slice of life, behavior and relationships. It felt very much like an acting class, when she was working on, as far as, grabbing moments, and it felt like that, like she was grabbing moments, and then, in her cut in part two, it was interesting to see how she laid those things all together, which I thought she did pretty successfully. So,
And for you as a young actor starting out working with two people, one of whom is very well established, someone else who's coming up in the world and made a lot of some really great movies, what was that experience like for you? What did you learn from that?
I think ignorance was so ignorance was my closest friend and biggest ally in the process, because I knew nothing of their genius because I wasn't familiar with the medium, so I had no idea what they were doing exactly. I just knew that we were all in concert and trying to make something happen together. So for me, watching the whole episode, like watching the whole thing, was I really began to learn what they were doing from that point of view, seeing how they put it all together, why she wanted it to be this way, why Gus moved this guy here for that reason, and just, they're so individual, so it was a great lesson in, being perceptive and being flexible and vulnerable to, who was leading you, and what scene, and how they were making suggestions to you. So it was it was a dream come true, and then it was such a as you know, us coming from where we come from, like it's a dream to one, just work, and two, to be working on a great project with great collaborators.
Absolutely. And speaking of those great collaborators, the show has a great mix of newcomers and old veteran actors.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the experience of working as an ensemble?
Yeah, it was interesting because we were, my team, Austin P. McKenzie and Emily Skeggs and myself, we're all theater kids, so in our own way, we've been acting for a very long time, not as nearly as long as, say, a Whoopi Goldberg or a Rosie O'Donnell or, Felicia Rashad. No, not nearly as long. But as far as ratio goes, we've been working on our craft, for a while, but definitely newcomers when it comes to the medium of acting, medium of film acting. And so we had our own energy, we were kind of, we're very scrappy, very, very focused, very, very, just very gracious and happy to be there. And I think that it lended to a real giving over to the whole process, and real surrender to the script and to the story, and we're just gobbling it all up. And then the moment when the big kids came in, that was interesting because we all met in San Francisco, and it was just a day of, we had shot mostly part one. We had shot for the most part all of that in sequence. There were a few things that we couldn't, but for the most part we shot it all in sequence. And then when we got to San Francisco, we all met, and we began to, some days, younger Ken, I was working, and the other days, older Ken was working. So we had a lot of overlap. And so the energy of the ensemble, of the entire ensemble, was really being cooked. The pot was really boiling. And that was interesting to, see how they worked in their mediums, and how they, handled their business on and off set, and how they approached the script, how they spoke with, Lance about the language, or how they would speak to, whoever they were dealing with. They were collaborating in a more, just in a different way than myself and Emily and Austin did. And so I think we really gelled in that way. We were learning, and they were experiencing, youth. Cool.
Right. As people continue to discover this show,
Yeah.
what do you hope people take away from it?
Wow. I think not the most important thing, but something that the show has something for everybody. I mean, you're following these three individuals from a very young age to damn near middle age, and they've experienced a great deal. So first and foremost, it's a story about people, and their struggles, and how they deal with life and death and joy and pain, and being nomads, and fighting for their rights, and for their country, and for their state, and for their their way of being. It's a story. It's a story. It's a hero's journey in many ways. These people are fighting for their lives, and it's told in a way that everyone can connect. Now, what's in the background of the whole thing, or the foreground of it, depending on how you look at it, is the fact that what these individuals share is the oppression of a society that doesn't allow them to be fully human, to be fully themselves. And that's what they're coming up against. The fact that these individuals are homosexual or transgender, and that is what they are being ostracized about. That is what they are fighting for. They're fighting for their equal rights, and equal rights is something that I think everybody can grab onto, whether it's Black Lives Matter, or We're With Her, or however you want to look at it. We are all, as human beings, always fighting to be seen and to be equal and to have everyone wants their fair share. And in this story, I think when you watch it, you can find something, multiple things to latch onto and to learn from. When We Rise really seems like a blueprint for how to make change and how to make positive change and how to deal with knockdowns and oppression and suppression and how to rise up, how to live as a society as well as an individual.
Absolutely. Well, Jonathan Majors, congratulations, and thank you so much. It was great talking to you again.
Man, I'll see you again.
All right, see you again.
Bye, brother.